Hello. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the final design chat of our Kickstarter. Hope you can all hear me all right. Let me make sure I've done everything I need to do on the back end here. And then we'll get in the weeds. This is going to be a real weedy design chat, I promise. Get all this stuff set up. Okay, sorry. I'm looking away from you all because everything is happening on my other screen. All right, well, we'll let some folks get in. Hope everyone is having a lovely Monday. We are having a great time here. I think, there's just something about the end of the Kickstarter, right? The air is electric. Everyone's very excited. Almost all of the work of these Kickstarters happens before the Kickstarter starts. So usually, we kind of do the launch and have that first week and we're all really busy. And then there's this like gradual decrescendo where we all relax and we get to start thinking about other things. And this project's been a little different because we're getting ready to move to a new office and we have a bunch of other things going on. And also I kept development active during the course of the Kickstarter, which is not something I would have ever done a few years ago. And so for that reason, I think everyone is feeling like, let's get this thing landed and then take a little bit of time to rest up. Oh, I am a bit quiet. Let me fix that. I want to be loud. Well, I can be this loud, I guess. Will we talk about the experimental stuff I did last time? Yes, I'll tell you about the things that worked and did not work. Yeah, we've got a lot. Actually, I have kind of a ton of stuff I want to talk to you all about. I hope my audio is better. Let me spend some time looking at this. I could put a filter on myself to boost. I could put a booster on. Okay, well, hopefully that'll be fine. If not, please turn up your volume at home. I don't want to live fiddle with this. With OBS. I feel like I'm now familiar enough with OBS that I'm inclined to make catastrophic mistakes, and so I have to be careful. All right, well, let's get into it then. So first, 1 second, let me check this. Good. It's the end of the campaign. We're almost done. We have a little bit over a day. I think we have about a day exactly, or a little less than a day left in the campaign, and we are all just totally delighted by how the campaign is done. One thing that I always, whenever I do one of these whenever I do one of these Kickstarters, I talk to my parents occasionally throughout the Kickstarter, and they always ask, their first question is always, what's your number? What are you guys really shooting for? Because they know that everybody, a Kickstarter is a place, a crowdfunding campaign is a place where you're getting a lot of information and a lot of knowledge about your audience and about enthusiasm for things you're working on. And so they know that, sure, there's a funding goal, and they know that a lot of money seems like a lot of money, which it usually is. But they also know that we have internal benchmarks. And I am happy to tell everyone that this is, I'm completely enthusiastic about this result. The key campaign to keep in mind when we were going into this, I remember telling this to Ted in the early days of the Kickstarter planning, that I wanted this campaign to do a little bit better than Oath. If it did super better than Oath, let's say it did as well as Marauder, that would mean that there was something up. That the game had gotten like too popular too quickly. When a root project does that well, we know that we're building on the game's success over many years. So of course the root projects are going to do better. But the game that I had in mind when I was working on this Kickstarter was Oath's Kickstarter. So Oath did 1 million, I think like almost 1.1 around there. And I thought I would love to see like between 10 and 20% audience growth on Oath. And that's almost exactly what we've gotten to. And so I've been really, really, really happy to see the campaign do this well, because that shows that we have a fairly low attrition rate among our core audience and that there's still excitement for a big experimental game like this. And it also shows us that we're not overexposing ourselves in the Kickstarter, because we would much rather find the like 10 to 15,000 people that we think are really going to like this, get them all together, get them to fund it. And then if the game surprises people or if it does better, awesome. We'll print a second run. That's kind of what happened with Root and with Oath too, certainly. So this is a super. This has been a really lovely response from our from everyone, and we're just really happy with it. And what it starts to do, a campaign like this doing well, what it gives us is just so many more controls. I mentioned this in an update early on about like what $1 million means to a campaign like us. We don't have a lot of stretch goals or things like that, and we don't have any stretch goals. We might have some things on the back end that we kind of want to do, but we're not sure if we should do. And we don't talk about them publicly, and I'm not going to talk about them now because we don't want to overcommit to anything. And what we'd rather do is during development, if we see like, boy, a double-sided board would be really good here. Well, let's take a look at our print run size, the budget for the project, everything like that. Can we afford to put it in there? And even, and so we are generally going to be making decisions which increase the value for the customer all the way through. So whenever we do quoting, actually, we know to base our pricing not just on the quotes right now, but our quotes assuming that we're going to be adding some stuff as we go. Because as anyone who works on the operations team knows, I always find things that I want to stuff into a game before we're done. So here's what I want to do today. So I'm only going to be on for like an hour or so. I got a busy day. I'm sure you all have busy days too. And I want to just kind of talk about what we've been up to this past month or so. I'll share with you some findings from some of our testing. I'm also going to talk a little bit about schedule and how we go about actually making something like Oath, something as big as Arcs. How we actually go about putting that thing into production. Cool. And if there are any questions, I am extremely happy to answer them. So just feel free to drop them in chat, and we can also have the conversation be steered by you all, because I don't have a super long agenda or anything. So first, let's talk about, let me actually bring up this document. Excellent. Let's talk a little bit about schedule. So I made this handy dandy calendar. Boop. And here's the calendar. And we know that Lunar New Year next year is the end of January. So I'm going to go ahead and put that here. There's Lunar New Year. Okay, so first I want to talk a little bit about how schedule works when it comes to making games. So, we have a delivery date of next holiday, next fall/winter for this game. And that delivery date has some built-in buffer. So we always build those delivery dates so that if we have to take one or two small internal delays, something like a month or two here and there, it's not going to affect the delivery date. And so then if we do have to delay, it's actually usually like the third delay that we take or the fourth, where we actually have to make a public announcement and say like, yeah, we're going to push things back a little bit. Now, to have a game get published in, and I should actually, let me make this little chart better. This is all 2022. That's the year we're in, right? I think. Hope so. And then, boop, boop, boop. And this over here is the land of 2023. Okay. Great questions. Glad to see those. All right. So if we want this game to be delivering in the fall of 2023, we probably need to get it into production by April at the latest. And when I say that, so this is like, I'm going to put a red circle to show that like this is where, oh my gosh, come on, Illustrator. Boop. Oh, wait, you know what I'm doing? I'm not actually sharing my screen. Haha. Thank you. Let me do that right now. Boop. Here we go. And you know what? I lost my little face, didn't I? I think. Ooh, you know what I'm going to do? Sorry, I'm doing this live. I kind of messed something up. Gonna fix it all. Just give me a second. I got tied up. There we go. I thought I had all this stuff done. Let me get this going proper. So this need to go here and here and live stream overlays. You know what I can do? No, I can't actually do that. That's too bad. Okay, let's get this in here. And we're going to close that. And then I'm going to turn on my camera. Boop, there I am. All right, great. Now everything's working properly. Okay. So here is I'm going to do this in Illustrator because, as you all know, I really like Illustrator. And it's not that I'm good at it. It's just I can use it. Okay. So here we have a kind of schedule. And, you know, this is 2022 over here. And then here's 2023. I guess, you know, I don't know how to do this. Like, let's not do that. We'll make this a little clearer. So this is 2022. And then here is 2023. Okay. So if we want to fulfill this Kickstarter on time, we need it to get it to the factory by the end of April. Now, you might say by the end of April, that seems like a long way from December. Well, it's not, because we're going to have a month of pre-press checks where we are working with the factory to make sure all the files are good. And then production is going to be a couple months, and then assembly is going to be a month, and then it's going to be a couple months on the water, and then a month of fulfillment or 2 months of fulfillment. So, you know, you add that all together, you oftentimes get to like a 6-month delay or so. So if we want this thing to be fulfilling in October or November, we're going to need it fulfilling by April. Okay, so that's my little hard end right there. Now, that doesn't mean we have to have the game done by then. I have no interest in publishing anything that's bad. So if we have a delay, we have a delay, and that's totally fine. And actually, the entire business model that we have here allows us to take delays when we need them, because we're really just interested in making the games as good as we can. So that's a long time. Now, I also know that things tend to go bad, and so I'm going to be planning some of this kind of tightly. And then what I'll say about this whole schedule is I'm going to kind of build a whole schedule like this, right? It's going to fill this whole chart. And then what's going to happen is I know I'm in terms of my actual internal planning, my real schedule, I'm going to be compressing it down to like here. And then when we have delays, I stretch it out. So, you know, you're seeing a version of a schedule, not like the true production schedule. Okay, this little black box, what's it? This black box is Chinese New Year or Lunar New Year. And Lunar New Year is a very important thing because generally you don't start a production right before Lunar New Year, because the people, you don't want people to get the job half done and then for them to go home for 3 weeks or 2 weeks and then to come back. So usually what happens is projects will start right after Lunar New Year, or they will start here. Yeah, and I think if you've ever followed a Kickstarter before, you know there's always a lot of belly aching about Lunar New Year. The reason why it seems like people, it isn't just publishers like using it as a cheap excuse. Like, oh, Lunar New Year happened, and you might say to the publisher, well, you knew Lunar New Year was going to happen. Why are you using it as an excuse? Well, it's because there's this ledge. Because if you get like here, and your files aren't quite ready in time, so imagine this is like submission, and it's followed by like pre-press checks, which will make it like a little extending line. Well, now the actual time for factory production might be too short to finish the game. So even though you got it submitted before Lunar New Year, they have to wait till after Lunar New Year to actually do the printing and the assembly. So there's all these like funny ledges around working in here. Generally, we avoid them. And in fact, my feeling is if you want to try to produce something before Lunar New Year, you're best off getting the files in November. Okay, so that's just an aside. Boop. All right, let's talk about what we need to do. So there's a lot of tasks that remain, and so I'm just going to kind of mark a few of them out. So right now in June, I have been doing a lot of world building, which I'll talk about a little bit, not a ton. And so I'm going to color. I'll make this green. So this is my world. This is world building work, and it's moving along. I've been. Oh my gosh, sorry. Okay, hold please while I fix this. This is world building. World building. Okay, so world building has been going on. I've got lots more meetings with Kyle and all sorts of things that we have to be doing. But that is going to be happening, and I'm hoping it is going to be done by the end of July. Then we also have a very important other process, which is core system. Core system design. And this process is getting close. I would guess that we're going to finish core system design by the middle of July. Okay. Then we have content design. And this is like all the different cards. You know, what are their names going to be, things like that. And content design is going to be continuing probably till mid-October. I don't know if it'll take that long. Maybe it'll probably be about late September when we're done. We've got a long way to go in content design. And content design has been a little slow lately because I've been working on this world building and core system design. So then the next thing is we have development. Okay, I'm going to put balance in there too. And this is going to continue into November probably. Really, it's actually probably going to continue, into the new year. Something like here. Something funny will happen towards this point, which we'll get to in just a second. Okay, now, this is all stuff that I'm taking lead on. Or like, world building, obviously, I'm doing the work with Kyle. Core system design and development, I have a dev team, but I'm not passing this project over. Sometimes when we're working on projects, we do handoffs, and I really like the work of development. It's actually one of my favorite parts of making games entirely. So instead of handing it off, I like to stay in lead positions when doing dev. And so I'm going to be hanging there for a bit. All right, let's build this out. So then, development balance, we're going to do usability. So usability will be interesting. This is like editing and usability. Edit. So we'll call this edit. That's not useful. Editorial. Well, don't worry about any misspelling I might do. So editorial, we're going to give this to Josh, and we'll make him blue. And editorial is going to go all the way probably until February, early March. Boop. And editorial includes usability studies, rules reading, all that kind of stuff. Now, this looks like we're doing a lot of editorial work. That isn't entirely true. The way the editorial work tends to work is that it's at a very low level, and then there are going to be these big patches where there's hardly any editorial to do at all. So, imagine it's like this, right? And so we'll be doing towards the end of editorial, it's mostly going to be usability studies and things like that. So Josh will be doing this. And Josh also huge help in development and balance, things like that. Okay, so we've got all that work. Then we've got graphic design. So graphic design is a little like editorial. And basically, we're doing this graphic design basically in 3 pushes, which I will explain in just a second. Whoop. So the way the graphic design works is we have done... Oh my gosh. All right, well, it's all right. This doesn't have to be perfect. So we did a big push of graphic design. So graphic design has been going on for a long time, right? It's way over there. Then we gave Patty a break because Patty had to build the Kickstarter page, right? So we can't have her doing game graphic design at the same time as we're doing Kickstarter graphic design. And so then, as we're doing core system designs, we're finishing the core system and we're doing content design, Patty's going to be doing some graphic design there. And so that's going to be this bit. And then, at the end of the project, when we get here, Patty will come in and get all the files ready for the end, and then she'll get all the files ready for the factory. So let me, if we're going to give Patty a different color here, and I'm going to use yellow, let's do orange here because I wanted to show something about this. The graphic design work changes as you do it, where in the early stages, you're just trying to make sure it all works. And here I'm using orange because I've got all these default shades, where by the end, this last stage of graphic design that Patty is interested in is the pre-flight checks, is pre-press, and getting everything ready for the factory. So it gets very intensive and specific towards the end. So Patty has already been working on this project for many months. Some elements of the game are quite far along. And other elements are nowhere to be seen. And then the last part, there are 2 other parts of the sauce. So I'm going to label one of them, we're going to call production design. So this is production design. Now we've already done some production design. There we go. We've already done some production design. I will go ahead and make this purple. And then we are going to have a couple other little bits of production design. We'll have one that'll happen around here, and then we'll have another one right towards the end where we get everything locked in before the factory. Okay, and then the very last thing, the thing that I have not included yet, but we'll stick right on there. And this, by the way, is not comprehensive at all. I'm just trying to give you a sense of how this works. The last thing is art. Kyle. Kyle's work. Art. Kyle lives here. Actually, that's not fair. Kyle lives everywhere in this chart. He helps with graphic design. He helps with production design. We put him in playtest, but I'll just put art and illustration is here. And art and illustration goes, I'm going to hope here. And we're going to give that a pink. Okay. So this is what we're looking at in terms of the schedule. So, just kind of the bird's eye view here is things like world building, core system design, content design, stuff that I'm going to be doing a lot of the work on. My work is a little front loaded. And then, by September, I'm kind of done. I've done a lot of my work, and I'll continue to take lead on dev balance. But mostly my job when it comes to a big project like this is serving as like a movie director. I feel like when I'm having dev meetings with Josh and Nick or art meetings with Kyle, I'm just trying to encourage folks and make sure everything stays roughly on task. I get to make a lot of like yes, no, executive decisions, but that's it. It's mostly I need to make sure that everyone's working in a way that is holistic, that everyone is having the large picture in mind. So that's my contribution here. And then editorial, Josh, he is in almost all these meetings with me. He's helping with all levels of design development. And then the bulk of his editorial work is going to be kind of sprinkled throughout this process. And then towards the end, it will take a turn and will start becoming more about usability testing and like final design. Patty's work on the graphic design team, and we might use a couple different folks in addition to Patty for graphics. And by that I mean I might end up doing some graphic design. Kyle will do some graphic design. Nick will do some graphic design. Even Josh. And then what will happen is Patty kind of drops in occasionally. And each time, so for example, this pass right here before the Kickstarter, this was like making the game look good enough to share. This pass says, hey, we know everything that the core system does, so we can start putting everything together and like coming up with how all the different cards look. And then this pass way down here, that's 4 or 5 months later. This pass is where Patty says, hey, in development, did anything change? And she is interested in this point of like, what do we need to redo to but to adjust for the development course? And then this pass at the end is, let's get these files ready for the factory. Because there's a huge difference between, there's a huge difference between sending something to be printed at a Kinko's or a FedEx Kinko's or sending it to a factory, right? Actually, on that note, I'm going to share. This is a book I've been having in my office. People at the company have already seen this. This book, my wife found this for me. It's amazing, and what I love about it is it starts like very straightforward story time with Cole. I like books. I like the way a book feels, but as you get into the book, it really talks about I'm going to put this here. It goes through the nitty gritty details of like figuring out how you're going to do the illustrations. How does a copy editor do their job? How do the paintings work? It goes through color separations. It's amazing. This book is fabulous, and it reminds me a lot of my day job. So I just want to throw that out there. I happen to have it on my desk. It's exactly what I'm talking about. A lot of that work is the work that is done here in this last little block. Okay. Now we have production design. So we've already done a lot of production design. We kind of know how big the box is. We know what things are going to go in it. There are a lot of unanswered questions though. And those questions range from How large should the pieces be? Actually, do I even have any Arcs pieces with me? We have a 3D printer now, so we can print them out. But we are like judging, like, how large do we want the meeples to be? Do we want them to be 36 millimeters long or 40 millimeters long or maybe 28? All questions like that. So we'll be printing and testing and getting the feel, getting the board right, how big the player board should be. So right now the player boards, for instance, are these boxes. These like big, they're a little shorter than a sheet of letter paper. Maybe we aren't going to have player boards. Maybe we'll have something else instead, or maybe we'll have a long strip. Those are kinds of questions that we answer in production design. And then production design will take a break, and we'll work on the game, and we'll get through all the content design. And then we have another moment where we say, hey, now we know how much we're going to put in this box. Does it all fit? Do we need to make the box bigger? And we sort that through that now. And then when the game is totally done and we're in final usability, that's when we do another round of production design. And that production design is like Josh asking, hey, can we make the rules 4 pages longer? Do we want to have do we want to have player aid sheets? How many should we have? What kind of paper? All that kind of stuff. And I love production design stuff. So I will be heavily involved in this as well as with our factory coordinator. Okay. And then of course the art phase, is continuing this entire process. Kyle has done lots of streams where he talks about all the good work he does. His work changes. Like in this early stage, a lot of the art that Kyle's sharing is basically concept art. And I'm going to start having meetings with him this week and next week where we say like, okay, let's start putting together an actual art list and drumming up real content. And by which I mean, it's not that the stuff he's been doing hasn't been great. It's been fantastic. It's just, it's not necessarily card art. The cards are going to look a little bit different. They might have backgrounds. We're making some changes to like how they actually, how they compose, not compose, it's the wrong word, but like how the layout works. And so Kyle will of course be doing compositions that are directly related to that layout. And the art process will continue right up until the end. So when Patty is finishing the files, we'll be getting new art. And in the past, we sometimes stretch this into pre-press, even though that gets a little dangerous. And so I'm hoping that we can finish this right before. Now, a couple things I'll note about this. One, here's Lunar New Year. You'll note that our schedule is designed in such a way as to not care about it. Like I don't care that this happens. All of our factory stuff is probably going to be in the later spring. I should also mention that if I take this, internally, the schedule actually looks like this, right? This is what my real schedule that we're all running on. So if you're on the development team, you're looking at the schedule thinking like, this is different from what Cole's talked about. That's because this is the real schedule, something like this. But I know that we're going to run into problems. And so you always build in padding like this that says, hey, it's okay if we take a delay. We know that these things are going to work, this particular way. Cool. Okay, I see I've got some questions built up, so I'm going to go ahead and drop in those. Okay, this is very good. What sort of tools do you use to schedule this internally? I use Google Docs. I've got some Gantt and I'm using why can't I think about what it's called? I have a Kanban. I have a big Kanban I built in Google Sheets that I've been using to track some of this stuff. Honestly, I do use an Illustrator for a lot of it. Not this, but I draw it out by hand. We tack it up on walls. We use whiteboards and lots of spreadsheets. I actually don't really like using Asana and Basecamp or any of those, or like a Trello board, because there are some specific reasons why they're not super effective, but we tend to, every project has like a project manager. Usually it's the person who is the designer or who is the dev lead. So I'll be project managing this project, and I have a particular way I like to do it. And then Josh, for instance, might have a Trello board that he uses for his own tasks, which is great. And then if you're ever collaborating closely, for example, when Patty gets ready to do pre-flight checks, she has a whole Google spreadsheet system that she uses to track changes and submissions and things like that. I would prefer to leave it up to my team members rather than putting everything on one platform. We all have different ways of doing it. Every project I've ever managed is mostly done in a handful of spreadsheets and some Illustrator files. Seriously. Okay, then Galanet asks, how do you think publishing in-house rather than going through a publisher impacts game design? Huge impacts. So basically, am the creative director here. I get to, if I want to talk about production, I just walk down the hall to talk to someone about production. If I want to talk about marketing, I knock on Brooke's desk, or not knock on her desk, her door, although more likely she's going to knock on mine. Um, it changes everything. It gives us a huge degree of control. And some people ask us like, well, why don't you do Kickstarters later in the process and things like that? And the thing that they're not seeing is that like this world building started a while ago. This core system design started a way long time ago. This content design started a long time ago. So even though this looks like there's a lot of work ahead of us, we are, very much at the beginning of not the beginning. We're very much like in the middle of a large project, and we like to, when we do our Kickstarters, just depends a lot on a ton of different factors, including our production schedules, our marketing schedules, how the company's cash flow is sitting. All of those things go to decide like where our Kickstarters can be. But we like to do them, about halfway through a project or a little bit more than halfway, because we like showing this stuff. We like kind of demystifying the game design process. Okay. Someone asks, this is Stern Yager asks, core system, is that the action economy, what a player can do in a turn, things like that? Yes, it's both the action economy, but also it's the action economy, it's the resource economy, it's the verbs and nouns of the game. Should there be ships is a question for the core system of the game. How should ships work? That kind of stuff. Normally I don't use Kanbans because if you've used a Kanban before, it's a poll technique. It's a poll system where you finish something at your stage and then it gets pulled into the next stage, right? So like a Kanban, I'm not going to make one right here, but like I'll make a simplified one, right? So like, I'll make a very simple Kanban to kind of show you. So maybe let's say this, and then Nick, and then Patty. So imagine, for instance, that we were doing a Kanban. And so I'm doing design, Josh is editing, Nick is doing development, Patty's doing graphic design. And so you have a task. Here's our task. Boop. And I'm working on it. When my desk is empty, we have all these undone tasks sitting here in a pile. And when my desk is empty, I pull it onto my desk. And then when I'm done, I flag it. And then Josh can pull it into his column. And when he's done, he flags it, and then Nick can pull it into his column. And then when Nick's done, he flags it, and then Patty can pull it into her column. Now, this is a great way to do games, to do projects, but it's a bad way to do the kind of games we make, because what will happen is we'll get all these tasks done, and then I'll say, wait, everyone, I want to change the design. Everyone says, groan, and they take all this stuff back to the start, and we go through it. So generally, we avoid Kanbans because the design process is so fluid. Now, Arcs is actually a little different. We do have a Kanban that I'll be managing for the sake of the game, because after the core system is done, it's going to basically hard lock. And so the kind of things that you saw, because the game is so content rich, that we have to design a core system, make sure it's as strong as possible, and then we have to put like a padlock on it, because there's so much dependent content that if we were revising the core system late in development, it would cause nightmares. Whereas Oath, we could be pretty footloose and fancy free about it. Okay. So let me, there were just a couple other questions. Oh, someone asked a really good question about, someone said, okay, this is a great question from Rubik's. I know people generally voice concerns and solutions throughout the process. How much do you consider these? Especially so when you're actively designing a game and everything's in flux. So basically, how much do we read y'all's discussions? Well, sometimes we read them very closely. In fact, I make it a habit to look through all the new ratings of any game I've worked on every day, because I want to know if someone's hating a game, I kind of want to know why they don't like it. But I don't generally do that for games that are in progress. So like I care a lot if someone like had a bad game at John Company, because I love that game. I think I did a good job. And so if it didn't gel with someone, I'm kind of interested why. But when I see comments about Arcs, I think it's funny mostly because the game isn't done. And Arcs has been interesting because I think that we went to a lot of lengths to make the game extremely accessible and playable from day one. And what that did was it brought this big audience of people who weren't super familiar with us and decided, well, I'm going to play this game. It's so close. It seems so close to done that I even feel comfortable submitting a review for this game and then having a conversation about it, which is stunning to me because Arcs is so far away from done. But I think that has caused there to be a lot more conversation about the design than there would normally be. Most of that conversation is just chatter for me. I don't look at it too closely. And in fact, when we're in a hot development period, I tell everyone on the development team, like, to mark as read. Like, do not read those comments. Don't want them in their head. Later on in the process, we spend a lot of time looking at those comments. And we care a lot about comments, especially from people who are testers or people we've played with before. Okay. Oh yeah, we can do graphic design streams. We'll see. I don't know, Patty. I don't know if Patty would want to do that. I don't mind doing a graphic design stream though. For this, as you can see, I'm this is the height of my graphic design. Okay, so anyway, the short answer is I'm really interested in those conversations, but usually they're tangential. So here, actually, I want to talk a little bit about versioning. Okay, so I'm going to extend this back a little bit. So here's June, which is where we live now, and here's April. Okay, so there's May, there's April. Yes, I've got some recommendations for graphic design books. I really like, sorry, I'm scrolling back so I can look at my bookshelf. Oh, shoot. There's a graphic design book that I really like. I'm going to look up on Amazon really quickly. I just can't remember what it's called. Oops. Okay. I wonder where that is. Is it? Oh, here it is. Here it is. So I have two that I recommend. So when I was a baby graphic designer, I'm still a baby graphic designer, but when I was first starting out, I wanted to learn how to do graphic design, so I taught myself first Photoshop, because that's, I don't know, every high schooler knows how to use Photoshop. But then I taught myself Adobe Illustrator, and I read these two books. Boop. This, Thinking with Type, excellent book, and this is The Elements of Graphic Design. I read them from cover to cover, and I thought they were wonderful. I feel like they taught me so much about how graphic design works. And it's one of those funny things where I feel like in graphic design, as many things, you can get good at the software. You can learn Affinity, or you can learn Illustrator and Design. You can learn how to do things. That's great. But that is only one part of graphic design. And so much of graphic design is not only practice, but also some pretty basic theory, like please just read a few essays about visual hierarchy, read about how negative space gets used. And when you do that, one of them builds on the other, right? So it's like, you're learning how to play the guitar, you learn covers, and then like learning music theory. So yeah, again, I'll really recommend this book, Elements of Graphic Design by Alex White. And then this one, Thinking with Type by Ellen Lupton. Both great, both super helpful in my self-education. Those are some kind of beat up and loved books. Get a book on Saul Bass. Yes, that's right. So many. I have so many graphic design pet peeves. It's like hardly even worth talking about. It's just mountains of them. I'll give you my biggest pet peeve. So many graphic designers are trained to only make files in the digital space. And when they go to start making files for like a board game, something that's going to be printed physically, they have so many obvious problems where I'm like, this would probably look good on a screen that looks horribly printed. One of my biggest pet peeves is the overuse of white type. White type, especially at small sizes, reads so badly in print. For reasons that require like a microscope to see. I mean, like it's amazing how much small, like the noise on the edge of the letter and the different kinds of printing. Cool. All right. So anyway, yeah, we were talking about dev stuff. Sorry, got sidetracked by talking about graphic design. The Nemesis rulebook is horrible. And it's not the content of it, it's just the way they laid it out. I feel like they never printed it out. Okay, so I want to talk about dev. So when you're doing dev, whoops, that's not what I want. So we had a version of the game which we designed, and we got ready to ship out to reviewers in mid to early April. And we'll call this the Kickstarter preview version. Okay, that's the yellow. And then after it was shipped, we kept working on it for final balance adjustments. And then, and this is the orange one, which is orange because Kickstarter is green, isn't it? Okay, we're going to color it green. Okay, so here is the Kickstarter version. So we have our Kickstarter, it launches, and we're going. So then, while that's going on, so here's the Kickstarter version. This is the one you've all played, right? And then, oh my gosh, this is such a horrible way of explaining this. I'm dying. I'm making some adjustments to this chart. And I actually am going to talk about specific things from Arcs that we're working on, but schedule stuff is fun too. So here is our map. Okay, let's talk about schedules. Okay, so this is the Kickstarter previews, and this is the Kickstarter Kit A. All right. So what we did is anybody who had a preview kit that wanted upgraded to a Kickstarter bit, we provided support to help them do that. But critically, this Kit A is basically the same version as the preview, but the texts were faster. There were a few little adjustments. We cleaned up the raid rules a little bit. From the previews. But this is, if you're playing the Kickstarter version, you're actually playing a version of the game that we were finishing in March. So you're 3 months behind, I'm sorry. While that's happening, we have version B, which is what we're actually working on right now. Right, so this is I don't know, I'll make this brown or something. So version B is the one that we've been working on internally. And we actually even stopped testing because we got to this problem for a while. There was the Kickstarter preview version, there was the internal version that we were working on for the Kickstarter release, and then there was version B, which is the actual next step of the design. And they were all happening at the same time. So I had Josh and myself, we went into our testing Discord and actually said hey, everybody stop testing for a while because we can't support 2 active development branches at the same time. Okay. I use a lot of paper and pencil. I have this very full, it's almost empty, my poor notebook. I always use these little legal pads and sketch stuff on them. I always find an appropriate thing. Always doing stuff with them. And I do a lot of writing on it. I can't share that as easy, and my handwriting's horrible. So I know I'd rather just do it in Illustrator. Okay, so what we've done then is we have a version of the game which is a lot better than the version that y'all have played that we've been working on, and that's version B. And then to just kind of look at this, version B is basically going to take us right about to the end of the core system design, and then I imagine maybe we'll do a version C, which will take us to the content design end, and then maybe there'll be a version D that will take us through development. Okay. And it's also funny to talk about A, B, C. Oops, sorry. I cloned it and didn't change the letter. It's also funny to have this conversation in the context of the larger game because we change versions constantly on the back end. And the version of Arcs that y'all are playing is I don't know, probably the 8th cut of the game. And the 8th cut is the first real cut. Okay. Sorry, I'm a little scattered in this description. That's fine. I have a lot of stuff I want to talk to you about. All right, so because we're working on version B, we don't care too much about what someone says about this. I'll make a little star. This is my pointer. My pointer, the blue star. So whatever someone might have to say about Kit A, I just don't care that much because we're over here. We're already working on this stuff. And a lot of what they're commenting has like already been figured out. Someone sent me this like long Twitter message with like a bunch of very fine-tuned adjustments to the objectives. And I was like, oh, those objectives are like, they didn't make it, man. And I'm not too worried about it. Okay, cool. So that's all that stuff. All right. So here's the schedule stuff. Now you can all see it. Now if I'm extending this out properly, like obviously the production design stuff has been going on a long time for the past. Editorial's been going on for a long time, etc. Art's been going on for a super long time. I think, Kyle started drawing stuff for this game last fall, I think was the first pass. Like I feel like he did some sketches for me in October. And so, it's a big project, and then this just happens to be when we're doing the Kickstarter. All right. Cool. So that's schedule. That's the first item on my agenda. My goodness, we've not gotten anywhere. But I wanted to talk through it because even this casual thing hopefully can give you a sense of how this works. Now, one thing I'll mention about this is, and this is something that I think separates our work from the work of a lot of other board game studios. You will notice there is a ton of overlap on this schedule. That is on purpose. So from a project management standpoint, that's why the Kanbans are so bad. Because when I'm working on a card, I want to be designing it. I want Nick to be developing it. I want Patty to be doing the graphic design, and I want Kyle to be drawing it all at the same time. And that means that we're all working on a very live project. And it means that we can be very adaptive and flexible. It also means we generate a lot of waste because then something doesn't work or we have to redo things constantly. And so most game calendars, if you see this, I don't want to cast shade, but if you look at a lot of Kickstarters and game companies as they talk about games, they have this like little project meter, and it says like design, done, illustration, done, development, done. And I'm sure that is partially like they're just trying to make it easy to understand. But I just want you to know that like that is almost the opposite way that we work because we really we have everything happening at the same time. And waste certainly can be useful later. Da Vinci asks, what are the main points and inefficiencies and breakdowns in the processes? We'll save that for the postmortem. Catch that on GDC in 3 years or whatever. But the main breakdowns that are going to happen are times when I have Kyle or Patty do a lot of graphic design work, or I have Josh do a lot of rules work, and then we edit something and have to change it, and we have to scrap it or reincorporate it in some other way. And that's just part of the process. There were a lot of Oath illustrations that didn't get used. In fact, the whole Oath art style didn't get used. And I don't think that's quite going to happen with Arcs for reasons that I can get into in a little bit. Okay, cool. So here's how much I care about this schedule. We're just going to scoop it away and not worry about it. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about product strategy and storytelling because I mentioned that I was doing all this world building work. And so, and actually, I'm going to start with Base One Mo's question. So the concerns are about the somewhat stale base game compared to the more exciting campaign are irrelevant at this point. Okay, so the question that's being asked is, are you they're all one of the most common complaint that we've gotten is the base game seems boring and the campaign game seems exciting. Why would I ever play the base game? And I saw a comment yesterday on some internet forum or chat room or I can't remember where I saw it, but they said, they said, hey, in the product design, you have this thing called the More to Explore pack. And if I'm only it's a shame that pack does not have any campaign content because I am only going to be interested in the campaign. And I looked at that comment and thought, the audacity of this comment is incredible because they don't even know what the base game is yet, really. So let's go. Let's talk about the base game. So let me, Okay, I'm gonna take this next section from the perspective of storytelling. Okay, so I will say the two books that I've been reading. I'm actually, you know what? I'm gonna, because I'm on a computer. I have been reading two books, and I'm gonna share them both with you. And those books are. One second. Okay, so I've been reading two books, and they've been very important to the world building of the game. And one of them is, whoops, not that. That's nothing. One of them is this, The Encyclopedia of Early Earth by Isabel Greenberg. I love this book. I read it and had such a good time reading it, I just read it again. And I've been thinking a lot about it. And then the other book that I've been reading a lot of is this amazing, amazing history book that is a harder recommend. So everybody can read the Encyclopedia of Early Earth. That book's great. This book is a little weird. So the next book is Pierre Briant's Darius in the Shadow of Alexander, which I've been thinking a lot about. I think this book is maybe one of the greatest books of ancient history I've ever read. It is kind of boring and weird, but that's also the point. So Pierre Briant's, he's a French historian, historian of the Persian Empire, of the Achaemenid Empire. And what's interesting about this, so this is about Darius III, best known as the guy who lost to Alexander. So what's interesting about this book is, it is a heavy book physically, is this, esteemed historian is trying to write a history of a king who is mostly famous for losing a war. And so there's the canard about history only being written by the winners. Well, how do you write a history of like the biggest loser of all time? And so it's interesting because it's entirely about the work of doing ancient history. Like here we have this person who we know exists mostly because of history books not written in his language. There's hardly any monuments left over, hardly any coins. We have no idea what this person looked like. And it's all about how the work of history works and how we remember the distant past. I love it. It's amazing. Pierre Briant also wrote this amazing history of Alexander called The First European, Alexander in the Age of Empire, which is about how historians and thinkers in the 17th and 18th century talked about Alexander the Great. Also very, very good. But this is like academic history. So like by all means, Encyclopedia of Early Earth, graphic novel. You can read it in 2 hours. Fabulous. This one, if you like ancient history but want to really have your head scrambled, this is a good one. Really, really cool. So these books have been really, really important in shaping my thinking about the storytelling technique of Arcs. And so I will share a little bit about how Arcs' storytelling works. I'm not going to talk about specifics for people sensitive to spoilers, but I'll talk a little bit about it. So Arcs is the first game I've had to do a lot of storytelling on. And the basic idea is we have this present. Whoa, that's not anything. 1 second. Let me get a better sized thing. Okay. So here's the present moment of Arcs. All right. It's a big, juicy present. There's a lot of funny things to it. It's wide. There's a lot of action to it. Actually, you know what? It's so big that we're going to make it really large. Whoa, it's a big blob present. Thank you, Kyle. This is a lozenge. And the idea here in Arcs is that the present of the game is very, very broad. There's a lot of worlds and peoples and histories and all kinds of things that are all in the present of the game. And the campaign has these plot lines that extend out from the present. There they are. We've got 8 of them. I don't know if I'm going to bother to draw 8 bad arrows. I know that you can do arrows in Illustrator, but that doesn't sound fun. So here's all the campaigns. And in the future, we can add more lines to this. All campaigns that we ever make for this game are going to extend out from this present. Okay. So there we go. History is a squid. You heard it here first. And when I think about the present, I think about the characters who you're playing in the game, which are imagined to be sort of like young adults. Like when you start the game, most of the plot lines end with you as kind of like a scion of a lesser noble house. You've just gotten back from a big trip. You've had your education. You have some ambitions and some ideas about the rest of the world. And now you're going to start on that journey. So everyone is like in that place, and you're coming from different backgrounds, and there might be, maybe some people don't have a noble heritage or something like that. We have a lot of different plots, starting positions, but roughly we're in a position of rough symmetry. Now, that is a metaphor for my creative work, Gavin. Thank you, or Galen. So now, what do we do with this? Well, this is the campaign game. Bloop bloop bloop. That's the campaign game. Now, how do we do world building? Well, we can do world building by naming the cards, by providing all this spicy information, by using flavor text, by using illustrations, product design, all that stuff does world building. But I want to make a game with really, really deep history. And so what I did is there's a timeline. Here's the timeline. Goes back into past. And I'm now going to resize the canvas appropriately. Here's the timeline. Zoop. There won't be a lot of flavor text. There will be some, though. Okay, so here's the timeline. And what I did, I have a world building document that I won't share because I know someone's going to screen grab it, and I don't want to do that. But I have this big world building document where basically what I've been doing is writing fragments. Fragments of different texts, some poetry, some little short stories, all sorts of things. I have all these fragments, and the idea is they are fragments that would be familiar to people living in the present. So I have no interest in writing the authoritative history of this world. I do have an interest in trying to explain what the people of this present know about their past. And so, for instance, there are all these events. Like for some people have noticed that the players are called regents. Well, you have a regency when someone isn't yet of age, or if the actual ruler is missing. That is like a component of the game's larger story. And so throughout the history of the game, there are all these like breaks, these critical moments, which I'm going to put little squiggles on. These are like, some of these moments are recent historical tragedies. Some of them are like legendary periods. Some of them are even mythical periods, things like that. Now, what we're going to do with these is the idea is the base game, which was presented to you kind of without theme because I didn't want to put a theme on it yet. The way the base game is going to work is the base game is going to come with kind of like two sagas or two epics, two stories. And each of those stories is going to be about something that happened in the past of the game. So here, for instance, is the base box, base arcs. Whoop. It contains those things. And so the way this is going to kind of work together is, the base game right now, I'm imagining is having like these two stories, and one of them is going to take place in the equivalent of the game's Middle Ages. So it's sort of going to be like a high medieval like period piece. And then the other one is about the founding of a really important state that happened. And so one of the games is more about, it's kind of a classic people on a map game where you have conquest and war, like any game you'd be playing about the Middle Ages, all those kinds of stories, big feasts and fighting and all that kind of stuff. That's all happening in one of these scenarios. Then the next scenario is more about negotiation. And it's a scenario about this like Congress, like the founding of this big government. Now, both of these stories are really important. These are critical historical elements. And both of them kind of presented as game scenarios provide very, very different play experiences. And what this means is that you want to play the single session game because it's giving you the kind of narrative backstory, I'm representing it with these stink lines, that is informing the campaign game. Because those base scenarios kind of give you the sort of backdrop that then the players playing in the present moment of the campaign game would have been familiar with, if that makes sense. Those are flavor waves, correct. So the thinking here is we're kind of building this thinking based on a really important aesthetic principle, which Kyle's been big on, which is the notion that like when we're designing these games, we want them to have a logic within the world of their own creation. So like Root looks like the kind of game that you could, like if you squint, it's almost like, oh, the creatures of this world are playing a game like Root. We want to design an object that looks like it's from the world in which it depicts. And this kind of takes that thinking like a step farther, which says not only would the game of Arcs be a game that the characters in the present moment of Arcs would play, it's a place where they can play their own history as scenarios of a game. And then when it's their turn in the campaign game, they are then playing their own game of Arcs and extending forward. So these two scenarios, they're not campaign scenarios, and I don't want them to be because it allows them to work in a totally different format. This scenario doesn't lead into this scenario. That does not happen. My gosh, my mouse just fell off the table a little bit. I don't want these two scenarios to be connected. Instead, they're like different Shakespeare plays, or like just a different legend or a story. Then, when it comes to things like the More to Explore pack, the small expansions for the base game can provide new little baby scenarios. So here's like, this is the currently it's called More to Explore, but you get the idea. It'll have a different name that'll be dependent on this. And so they're going to be like little decks of cards that can do lots of different things. Okay, cool. Well, that's the kind of like general narrative planning. Now, the reason why I'm talking about all this stuff is because I want you to understand how things influence other decisions. And I'm not going to go too much longer, but I will show you some of the things that we're working on. So, see, this is why I'm glad I didn't delete this big schedule chart that I made. So we're doing this world building. And that world building is now informing the product design and informing the core system design. Because now that I have this like theory for what I want base arcs to do, I can go back. So here's the theory of what I want base arcs to do. Look at that. It's obviously very clear. Now I can go back and say like, all right, well, we know that every one of these stories or scenarios, they need to have their own market cards. They need to have, their own objective cards potentially. They need to have their own little things that have logic within the space of the scenario. That I know what the product demand of that thing is. And then it actually can feed back on the world building. So for instance, the standard Arcs game that y'all have played has techs and research. And as we've been building this game, one of the things about the world building of the game is that all of the technological innovation that happened in the game happened in the distant past. So speaking of bad graphic design decisions, here's green on gray. So all of the tech discovery and innovation happened in the very distant past. So then what you're doing here is that secrets get forgotten, they get rediscovered, they get turned on, they get maintained. There's different half-lives to these different innovations that happen. But it means that we don't have to have like a new style of ship for every scenario. It's like, no, this is what the ships are like. They've been this way for thousands of years. And in this way, the game's product design starts to inform the world building as well. Okay, now someone so will the stories in the base game change for different plays, or will the stories remain? So what I'll say about that is that the current plan is the scenario designs. I hesitate to call them scenarios. I want to call them like sagas, because I think that, or plays or stories, tales maybe. I don't know the right word yet. But my hope is that you could play the same scenario, the same story. It could be played dozens of times. And there's just a lot of replayability in every single one of them without changing the cards too dramatically. Like as much replayability as you find in the standard 4 factions of Root, I am hoping that you will find that much replayability in each of the scenarios for Arcs. Yes, yep, that is exactly right, Goldfish. Right, if you've played War of the Ring more than 3 times, you're going to find that much replayability. Okay, let's switch gears and talk about what we've been doing on the back end. So I'm gonna share this. Okay, so here's Arcs as you know it. It's pretty much like this, right? There's not a lot that's changed. And what I want to do now is I'm going to take 15 minutes or so and just talk you through like literally the dev chat that I've been having with people right now, or not right now. Blah. Let me start that over. What I want to do with my last little segment here is just talk you through some of the changes we've been making to the design as if you were sitting in on the design conversation that I had this morning with Nick and Josh. So you'll see a map that looks a lot like the map that you've already seen with some little adjustments here or there. One of them is the nebula's gone. We've built this like research station thing that works a little differently. Basically, it allows cheaper research. This isn't even the right text. And then I'll show you a couple of things. So one, here's the assault dice, but you'll notice the blank is now a star. Our thinking here, this is a special face. And what we've been doing with this is saying if the attacker rolls at least 1 star, all damaged units are removed. And so this is like the route face. And what this does is it really creates an interesting decision point where you'll have to decide, like, do I want to damage my own units to maintain my offensive power and kind of be the glass cannon? But if the opponent gets another attack and rolls a star, I'm going to lose all my damaged units. This makes the battles a little bit more dramatic, a little bit more punchy. And I'm really liking what it's doing to the game. We're still figuring it out. It's like it's less of a dramatic change than it might otherwise seem. And so, one of the tests that we have to take it through is really figuring out if it's worth it. On the resources themselves, fuel and weapons are still the same. And then the materials have been changed to, you may spend this to build or repair. So they're no longer a wild. Oh yeah, sorry, I'll go back and explain the star. I see this. I didn't explain it very well. If the attacker rolls a star before any hits are applied, all defending units that are damaged are destroyed. So this happens before any other hits are assigned. Okay, that should clarify that. So the materials are no longer wild, but you can spend this as a build action or a repair. And then the psionics, I've really liked this change, which basically says you can spend a psionic card to resolve a market space right now. So if you have a market card, here's one, and you have some cubes on it, and you can spend a psionic card to say, I'm resolving this right now. And then when you do that, you take this into your little hold, and then a new market card gets put there. So this allows players to get a little bit of market tempo control, which is really fun, and there's some interesting elements to that. Okay, now relics work very differently. So the way relics work is when you get techs, they go into your hold just like before. But you'll notice that relics, that all the techs now have a little cost in the top left. And that cost is how many relics you need to discard to activate this. And this is a free action. So if I have a relic in my hold, at the start of my turn, I can spend this relic and then immediately activate this tech. And then, and so I think we're going to be using the language of like locks and keys, like you like unlock a relic, you unlock a discovery. But yeah, because I kind of want to avoid some of like the research tech language. And then what we did is, and Josh and Nick deserve a lot of credit for this, they went through all of the techs and they added a lot of when researched effects so that as soon as you research something, you get like this like minor free action. So basically we've like sped up the game. We like pulled some actions out, which helps. Thanks Josh for doing a rules cleanup here. You don't have to, you can let them be a little confused. So other changes, action cards. What we did for the zeros is I think we're going to having 3 actions of each type on the zeros. Obviously Kyle did not draw this. I just like I kind of did a bad job, but it's fine. So we have 3 actions on the zeros instead of 2. That was kind of obvious. And then the other change, I guess I'll do it this way, is the production cards all got a boost. So every production card got an additional action. Cool. All right. Is that final art? I don't know. For what? For the action cards? I like the action cards a lot right now. Obviously, we're going to be doing a lot of art cleanup on them, but I would say if you have any doubts about final art, just look at Oath and say, do I like how Oath looks? And if you do, you'll like how this game looks. Because, it's the same team. Okay, so, all right, that's that change. So again, with these, we've got a little bit more market tempo control, a little bit more build tempo control, way more research tempo. Or not tempo control, where it's all up tempo. All those things have been sped up. In terms of costs to build, factories and extractors are probably going to go down to costing just 1 material to build. And then the material resource becomes like the universal building resource. Yeah, I guess I don't want to bury that lead. So this is like every factories cost 1 material to build. Speaking of builds, we're going to make some adjustments here. And so these steps will be, you can use all your factories to build, or you can put 1 factory on the board. And this is, you can use all your extractors to build, or you can put 1 extractor on the board, free of cost. Just giving players we want these to be relevant to everybody, even players who don't have a lot of those units on the board. Okay, so those are all kind of general system stuff we've been working on. Let me see. Don't mind these. These are not actually going to be, the relic cubes are not a thing. Okay, let's talk about victory points. So every scenario is going to have like a stack of cards. So the scenario is going to have, so like here's a scenario card. This is the founding of the council, which is an important part of the game's story. And the way the scenarios are going to work is there's going to be like a deck of 60 cards. We might even see about putting them in. This is, okay, here's a good example of a production concern. So I'll go big face for this. So here's the vast bonus cards. It may be that the scenarios, we make this box a little bit bigger to fit sleeved cards for those people who like to sleeve their cards. And what we do is we have like a tuck box for every scenario. Now, that's expensive from a design perspective. These tuck boxes cost 20, 30 cents. That's a lot of money for a production. It may not seem like it, but it is. They really add up. And so those scenario boxes, if I go into the project and we know how many copies we're printing, I can much more easily go to the production team and say like, hey, we're under budget in this other way. Can we go ahead and put these boxes in? Okay, so the idea is all the cards you need for the scenario are in here. And you open it up, and what do you see? Well, you see, let me go back over here. Bloop. You see a scenario setup card. You see character cards. You see a deck of market cards, a deck of special market cards, objective cards, and then maybe just some special scenario cards. And then the scenario card will tell you how to build the market. So for instance, it'll say, hey, you got these core market cards, go ahead and Pamir style, like split this into some stacks. Whoops. Like that. Whoop, whoop. And then it'll say like, yeah, then mix all these cards in this way, then stack them up. And now you have your market. So like, and all those things will be on this scenario card. Once you're ready, you flip this card over. This card will tell you like, hey, special scoring, you're getting points for destroyed buildings. Maybe you're getting points for winning market spaces. And then at the bottom, it has a final scoring condition, which is going to be unique to the scenario. So the founding council says, how much did you contribute to the founding of the council? And that's the final score. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about those things. So first I want to talk about these cards. These are breakthroughs. And the breakthroughs are going to be in the market deck. And the way they work is, this is a new way of doing breakthroughs. And so what's going to happen here is we've got a market card. Bloop. and we put out our texts. Here are the texts. Cool, they're going to get, maybe these two get researched, etc. Maybe nobody got this one, or maybe, let's say, 2 players were tied. It was a spicy thing. Players wanted the super factories, right? So we have this up. Then we're going to draw more cards. And when we draw these cards, we always are drawing 3. And if something is locked up, it just means that now this is a lot of 2 cards that's being auctioned together. So whoever wins this, it's like we're amping up the pressure of the game, right? So now you're winning both of those cards. Okay. Now, eventually in this deck, we're going to have a breakthrough card come. Boop, here's a breakthrough. And wherever it gets dealt, it's going to smash whatever's there, and it's going to lock the market. And some of them will say, hey, resolve this. Whoops. Some of them will say, resolve this when revealed. Some of them will just provide like a new step that you do. And then no new market cards are dealt. So now we're only working from these 2. So maybe these cards get 1. Maybe that card gets 1. Next turn we do this. Turn after that, we get these cards go out. Maybe a second one goes here. And then boom, second breakthrough happens. And what the breakthroughs are doing is they're acting like a timer. And some scenarios might have lots of breakthroughs and others might not have any. And this is just a piece in our development toolkit that we can use if we want to put in particular timing elements. We could also have a breakthrough that, for instance, doesn't clog and says like, hey, set this aside. This is a new global rule, but close everything else off. Okay. So that's how the scenarios work. One other adjustment. Sorry, I almost forgot to mention this. We're going down to, I think, 6 resources in each of the resource stacks. Not positive about that, but we'll see. All right. Cool. So that's that. How are we doing? 317. We're doing okay. Let's talk about objectives. So here's the objective system. We have these objective cards. There'll be a little deck of about 10 of these cards for every story, every epic. And then these are replacing the old objective cards. So the way they work is if you score this, if you control the most systems with no planets, or if you have the most ships on the map, you score 5 points. Cool. At that point, you flip the card over. You put an influence cube on it to show that you completed it. And then on future turns, if any player controls more systems with no planets than blue, they will score 3 points. Or if multiple players get this, they will all score 3 points. And then this card goes away. If blue holds this, if blue still controls the most, they will continue to score 1 point. So here, I'll explain that again with the shipwright. So we go to score the shipwright, and red has 10 ships, let's say. So red is going to score 5 points, and they're going to flip this over. And then on future turns, if red has the most ships on the map or is tied for it, they're going to get 1 point a turn for protecting their title. If any other player scores more, any player who has more ships than the shipwright, they're going to get 3 points each, and then this card is going to go away. So this is basically a kind of combination of the bounty system and the objective system together. And what I'll say is, I wish I would have kept notes from these meetings, because I think it was a perfect example of the collaborative process between myself, Nick, and Josh, where we were all building pitches of systems that were like all adjacent to this, and we just kind of kept like super colliding into each other. And then eventually this system came out, and we really, really like how it works. In fact, I like it so much that the bounty system in the larger campaign game is probably going to get adapted to this in some way. And one of these is dealt every turn. You can see the one on deck. They work this way, They all work like that. Pretty easy. Okay. Cool. So that's the bounty system. And for every scenario is going to have its own set of bounties. Every scenario is also going to have its own set of player characters. This art is actually from the Warlord scenario, the like high medieval scenario, but I'm just using it because we happen to have it. I will get to ask Kyle to make 5 character cards for this. I say 5. It's only 4 players, but this particular scenario will have 5 roles. You just use either 3 or 4 of them. So the way these work is players get character cards. Sometimes they will be matched to the color, other times they won't. And every character card has setup instructions and then a special power. So a lot of the scenario setup stuff is going to be on this card. In this particular scenario, this is about the founding of this particular government that was founded by the different guilds, the caretaking guilds, which we'll talk about, and maybe a story building, world building stream that we'll talk about later. And the way this works is all of the players are master of one resource. And the way that works is that if anybody spends fuel, it goes to the master of fuel. It goes to the shipping guilds. And they've got the fuel. And if the shipping guild spends their own fuel, it gets burned out of the entire game. And all of the rules for that are on the back. And the last thing about them is players on their turn are welcome to negotiate with each other and make deals. And if they do, they have to give at least one of the resources that is associated with them. So on the shipping guild's turn, I can make a deal with another player and exchange resources from our holds or other things. But if I do, I have to give them at least one fuel. So there's a little bit of negotiations happening. Now, some people talk about, are asking about, is this in the campaign game or base game? This is all in the base game. The base game is going to have two scenarios. It will have a kind of balanced intro scenario that is the medieval warlords fighting for power and prestige, very kind of traditional, classic, like pieces on a map war game, with a lot of good narrative elements in it that aren't in there currently. Or they are in there in our development version. They just aren't in the base arcs that y'all are playing. And then the more advanced scenario is the negotiation scenario that involves these different guilds. So it feels a little bit like small dunes. Are deals binding? We're talking about it. I don't know yet. I love binding deals in the abstract. I hate them when it comes to actually implementing them. We'll see where it sits. I think this game is goofy enough it might be able to survive binding deals. Okay, cool. So that is how the player powers work, and every scenario will have a different set of players. And then sometimes scenarios will have special components. So, for example, in this scenario, you gain you'll have these little counselor cards, and the way they work is you're building like strings of similar suited cards, and then at the end of the game, you have these hidden. These are my hidden counselors, which don't sit in your hold. They will sit, they don't count on hold. So you'll have a little stack of counselors. At the end of the game, everybody reveals their set, and whoever builds the highest value set gets points. And I haven't fully fleshed out the system, as you can tell. It's not really anything yet. But the idea here is this is a little bit of in-game unknowability. But also, it ties into the theme, and it becomes a thing that you can negotiate. We're going to say, hey, I desperately need the Fuel Guild's fuel. I'll give you access to some of my council founders, and maybe you can make good of them, or you can threaten, extort people, and all that kinds of stuff. So this is the negotiation scenario. So I want to provide lots of good grist for negotiation. So that is the general scenario design. Now, I had a few people ask, when will the PNP be updated with these changes? If you turn because of a file mistake, I think these dice are technically in everyone's copy. If you turn off mod caching, I will probably turn that off. But we have our own development branch. My guess is by mid-July, we'll have a new update for everyone, which will include both of these scenarios in the base game, which everyone will be able to play. And because actually our internal testers don't even have this yet, because we basically told them to sit on their hands because we wanted to do some internal development. And we're now at a point where I'm hoping that by the end of the week, we'll be able to restart our playtesting up, and they'll have access to this this stuff. And then we'll be able to release it publicly a few weeks later after some testing. But I just want to give people a sense of what we're hoping to do with the single session game. There's a lot of fun stuff in here, but the main thing is I am not really interested in designing this is basic and this is advanced. I'm much more interested in designing two projects that complement one another. And I think if you look at anything I've worked on in the past, you would see that was true, and it's certainly going to be true for this project as well. So yeah. I mean, it was always so funny reading comments of folks who were like, "I don't think the base game is very thematic," and I'm like, "We haven't put the theme in yet. Of course it's not. Like, chill. Don't worry. Um, I'm not going to turn around and make like a generic game here." Okay. Do the scenarios require specific objective cards? Probably. Our current sense is that every scenario will have 10 objective cards. Some of them are going to be borrowed from other scenarios. Like, it's not they're necessarily going to be unique, but we're probably going to print extra copies. So that way, when you go to pick a scenario, you just pick the one tuck box or the one bag. It has all the material you need for the scenario. And we don't like force players to go down that dark Arkham Horror living card game road where like they have to compose every scenario deck by having a binder of cards or anything like that, because I want it to be pretty fast to set up and fast to play. Okay. That's good. Yeah. Do you even need the campaign expansion? I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. I would say that if you want the full story of the game or the full engagement with what the system can do, you want both. But I think that for the groups who thought, I don't know if I can play the campaign, but I'm worried that this game is going to be like a little generic, and why wouldn't we just play Kemet? I can assure you that the base game is going to be a lot to chew on, a lot to explore. There's just a ton of material here. All right. Okay. Let me see. Let me look over here at my notes and talk about anything else. Nope. I think that's pretty much it. Any final questions? My big old mess of a game. Look at this table. Yeah, we are getting ready to like sort all the back end. The files for this game are a mess. So there is no like you always have to play a mode. So sorry, let me restate this better. Erzad asks, can you still play without a scenario? No. The base game, the way it works is there are two different modes, two different stories that you can tell with the base game. One of them is going to be the first one that you should start with, and then one of them will be a little bit more advanced. And you just have to select which one you want to play. And we are designing, if that presentation of the advanced scenario seemed a little scary, don't worry, that's the advanced scenario. The other scenario is not that much more complicated. It's actually technically slightly simpler than the arcs that you've already played. It just moves its complexity in different places. So someone, does your academic background help with narrative design? Yes, 100%. I think probably the fact that I stumbled into that Darius book, Darius and the Pierre Briand, I would never have found that book without my academic training. So it is constantly informing my thinking. Someone asked the question, what do you do when you're trying to fix specific problems? I think it depends on the type of problem, but oftentimes the development practice that myself and Josh and Nick all use is, why is there we usually try to state the problem. We just keep stating it over again. Like, what do we think the problem is? Why is that the problem? What do we think the problem is? Why is that the problem? And we just get in this little loop where we try to really enunciate what we think a problem is. And so the problem might have come from an intuition, or it could have come from reason. But either way, we don't change anything until we can state what we think the problem is. So for example, with the counselors, I guess I can switch my camera since I'm not really showing you anything here. I'll say with the counselors, there's a problem right now, which is that they don't have enough. There isn't enough reason to negotiate with them because it's too easy for me to build my own tableau of counselors. And so what we need to do is make the counselors, we need to make them more contextual in their value. And tracking back through, I would say, like, boy, the counselors feel flat. Doesn't seem like players are negotiating with the counselors. I want players to use them as the primary currency of this negotiation game. Well, how could I possibly do that? Well, I think the reason why they're not negotiating them has to do with how flat they are in value. Where like if it's worth 2 counselor points to me and it's worth 2 to you, trading it is hardly ever worth it. It's hard for either of us to get much comparative advantage out of that. So we just when we're developing around a problem, we are often asking ourselves, what precisely is the problem and why do we think it's the problem? And in enunciating what the problem is, that's when the solutions start coming out. Question about Duke of Fall asked about trick-taking mechanisms. All I'll say about that is I wrote a whole designer diary about it. You can find it on BGG. I think it's the 3rd designer diary. How'd you end up with Arcs? We had a few different ones. I really wanted to emphasize the story point of this, the telling of stories, both short and long. So Arcs fit. I like titles that are slightly abstract and metaphorical, right? I don't want to call this game like Zap or something. That's a pretty good name. So, will there be a learn to play scenario? Yes, the first scenario is kind of the learn to play scenario, but it's the learn to play scenario in the same way that the base 4 root factions are the learn to play root factions, but they're also ones that you can play, dozens and dozens of times. Cool. All right, I think that's it. Yeah, Nick, please take Zap. Zap is yours. I'm giving it to Nick and no one else. All right, everybody. I hope you have a lovely Monday. Thanks again for all of your kind attention to this Kickstarter and support. It's been amazing to see the community come out. I've said this before, I'll say it again. These Kickstarters are like big parties. We feel like we're inaugurating a community, and I've just been delighted by the community that's gathered around this game. We are at the beginning. We're in the middle of a long road. We're a long way from having this game done, but I absolutely cannot wait to show you more of the game, and hopefully we'll have a lot to share with you in about a month's time, and you'll be able to see some of these ideas in practice. All right, take care, everybody, and have a lovely day.